And we welcome to our desk for the first time Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz. He represents Florida's 1st District, covering the state's panhandle. Also sits on the House Budget, Judiciary, and Armed Services committees. Glad to have you with us. With the anticipated announcement today, Republicans are about to release their tax plan. We've been talking about it for a long time. I know you're headed to a meeting pretty soon here, so you might have to leave us a little bit early. But what can you tell us about the details of this tax plan?
Well, we're excited that the Republican tax plan will simplify the tax code. It will base of taxpayers so that we can lower rates for all Americans and really get the economy moving again. One of the things that we'd like to see is more robust GDP growth, and we think that there are some specific features of this tax plan that can make a substantial contribution to that. First would be bringing back the trillions of dollars in assets that are currently overseas as a consequence of a tax code that seems to disadvantage America to the betterment of other jurisdictions by having one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world. So bringing those dollars back will inject some immediate vibrance into our economy, and we're excited about that. We're also excited about bringing down the corporate tax rate. Because we have one of the highest tax rates in the world, too many Americans are not able to see that same opportunity for wage growth, for advancement in their careers, and by bringing our tax rate into line with the more competitive tax rates of other countries that are our peers and competitors, we think we can really get back in the game economically speaking. So those are two features. We also suspect that individual tax rates will be lowered. The standard deduction that people take will be doubled. And we'll have a system where 9 out of every 10 Americans can actually fill out their taxes on a postcard. Won't it be nice to have a fair, easy, simple system to comply with like that?
And again, this tax plan, you're going to find out about it in a Republican conference meeting coming up this morning. We'll all find out more about it at 11:15 with this press conference featuring House Republican leaders. We're going to be showing it live on C-SPAN 3, cspan.org. You can also listen to it on the C-SPAN radio app. But we wouldn't get to where we are today without that budget process that we went through, that we talked a lot about on this program. You were one of 20 Republicans who voted against the budget resolution. And so with your vote, had it happened that way, we wouldn't be to tax reform now. Why did you vote against it last week?
We unquestionably could have gotten to a tax bill by cutting spending as well. Sort of only in Washington, you can't do two things at the same time. I'm all for tax cuts, but I'm also for spending cuts. As a member of the Budget Committee, I've seen the way our $20 trillion debt, moving toward a $30 trillion debt over the next 10 years, is really a wet blanket over the American economy. And so while we're in the business of cutting taxes, I believed in the House budget, which also cut spending by over $200 billion. Unfortunately, the United States Senate was unwilling to cut even a nickel of spending, and that resulted in my no vote on the budget. I would have preferred to work out a deal with the Senate where we actually cut spending to ensure that whatever tax plan we develop doesn't balloon the deficit and doesn't contribute to rising debts in the future.
So should tax reform be paid for? Would you support a plan that does add to the deficit and debt?
I think in the short term we can add to the deficit if we believe that there is a long-term economic incentive, a long-term economic growth plan that will allow us to be able to recoup those initial losses with long-term growth. But my preference would have been to do these things at the same time. To get the full value out of tax reform, I think we also are going to have welfare reform, which is the type of spending cut that we advocated for in the House Budget Committee.
Where are you going to draw the line? What will be too much for you?
I think that it depends on what the projections show for growth. I think that ultimately we can't look at a 1 or 2 year window. We've sort of got to look at a 10-year window and see over time, does this tax bill create the vibrance in our economy that can be the rising water that lifts all boats? Or is this something that merely contributes to 15 years of generational theft? Look, I'm one of the youngest members of Congress, and I look at these deficits very grimly. I think that if we don't deal with these rising spending challenges we have, it'll be the young members of Congress that are judged most harshly by history because we would have been in a position to stop it and would have done nothing. So that's why I'm fighting for these spending cuts to be paired with tax cuts.
Congressman, in his first term, represents the 1st District of Florida with us this morning. Has to run a little bit early, so let me invite viewers to call in. Democrats 202-737-0001 is the number. Republicans 202-737-0002. Independents 202-628-0205. We'll get right to the calls for you Al is up first in Buffalo, New York, line for Democrats. Al, go ahead.
Yes, good evening. Good morning. As Mr. Gaetz says from Florida, I have people that live there, and they are getting their properties and stuff like that. They're stripped for a road to come through there to make it from a two-way to a four-way. I don't think that that's proper, for one. But my question is, if we're going to do this tax thing, as you say, reform, what provisions are we going to have after this thing is passed? Because sometimes you say, this is what we're going to get, but nobody says what. And sometimes it's like we're guessing on nickels and dimes. And my thing is, the cuts that they're going to make doesn't really fly. I'm a veteran, 21 years, and I can't see me taking a cut as far as being a veteran. And
Al, I appreciate your comment. Let me give Congressman Gaetz a chance to jump in.
First, Al, thank you so much for your service to our country, and there is no reduction in spending that is contemplated that would negatively impact veterans. As a matter of fact, the most substantive legislation that this Congress has put on President Trump's desk has actually allowed him to make some of the structural reforms at the VA that will increase the quality of care that our veterans receive. I'm proud to say that over 700 who were previously not meeting their commitments to veterans have been relieved of their duties at the VA, and I think that more than money, structural change will actually improve quality for our veterans. You mentioned a road widening in Florida. Fortunately, that's not something that members of Congress vote on. That's more at the state and local level. But I think it's worth noting that in the state of Florida, one of the reasons that we have enhanced infrastructure challenges is that people want to live in Florida. Florida has the lowest per capita state taxes in America. And it shows that if you cut taxes and have more taxpayers, you can actually have great vibrance in the economy and the need for infrastructure and the need for growth. As for the details of the tax plan, we'll be learning more in the coming hours and coming days, but our estimation is that regular folks throughout this country could see as much as a $4,000 savings on their taxes. Again, we'll be seeing more details, but that's the type of scope and range that we expect this to have and the impact we expect it'll have on American families.
And there has been uncertainty this week as the details of this bill have started to come out. Today's Washington Post reporting that House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Kevin Brady had said that the bill that will be introduced would not permanently lower the corporate tax rate to 20%. Instead, the cut would be temporary and the reduction would expire in around 8 years. That's not exactly what the president was promising when he was talking about permanent corporate tax cuts.
Well, and it shows that this is a fluid process. I mean, the way the legislative process works best is that ideas are introduced, and then through the committee process and through the amendatory process, those are honed, and we'll be able to choose which priorities are most important to the country as we continue to govern on those issues. I believe we need to permanently lower the corporate tax rate, and so I'll be supporting changes to the bill that will achieve that objective. I know for others, different types of deductions are very important, and that's their area of focus. But to me, getting the economy moving again, cutting that corporate tax rate, jobs and wage growth that we'd love to see in this country.
Give you a call from Florida. Sean is in Sugarloaf, Florida, an independent. Go ahead.
Oh, good morning, gentlemen. Sir, I'd like to suggest to you that you're referring to Jack Kemp's failed trickle-down economic policy. And at one stage in my career, I worked for a tax shelter firm. We had one doctor, a Beverly Hills doctor, that came in and he made cash, not stocks and bonds or anything else, $365,000. By the time our accountants and tax experts were through with him and our attorneys, he qualified for aid to dependent children, welfare, and food stamps. I would like to suggest to you, sir, that this is not a reality in any way, shape, or form. A flat tax of 10%, 5% goes to the state authority and 5% to the federal authority, and then you have to live within those means. And, gentlemen, I thank you, and a pleasant good morning.
Well, Sean, you are speaking my language with a national fair tax. I'm actually one of the sponsors of the fair tax and would absolutely support the system that you described over the one we currently have. Unfortunately, we don't have the votes to pass that. You can look up the fair tax and see which members of Congress have supported it and which have so far declined to lend their names to that proposal. But as it relates to sort of this theory of trickle-down economics, I'm with you that closing loopholes is actually a great way to lower rates for people. And so the doctor in Beverly Hills operating exclusively in cash, leave aside the fact that that sounds like a pretty dubious way to engage in a medical practice, but it also shows that we've got a tax code today that's 70,000 pages that is full of special interest carve-outs and giveaways. And that's why I'm excited to work with President Trump and Speaker Ryan and my colleagues in the House of Representatives and Senate to ensure that we close some of those loopholes, and that will help us lower rates for all Americans for a simpler and more fair tax code.
Damien, upstate New York, line for Democrats.
Yeah, good morning. I would like to ask you how you can justify supporting dropping the estate tax. I mean, it already excludes estates up to $11 million for a couple, and this is just strictly a perk for the donor class. How can you justify that?
Oh, I justify it easily by saying that the money that people have made throughout their lives is money that has already been taxed. So one of the reasons that I support abolishing the death tax is that it's really double taxation on people. It's money that was taxed at the time it was earned. The other thing is that we've got a lot of small businesses in this country that people really build up to pass on to the next generation. And if you've got a death tax, then when people pass on and want to make that gift to their loved ones, to their family members, to carry on a family business, oftentimes they don't have the ability to do that. To me, that's an impairment of the American dream. So by abolishing the estate tax, we really preserve that essential value that we hold dear in America, that the next generation can be better off than the generation before, and it also ends unfair double taxation.
Benita is in Riverton, Wyoming, line for Republicans. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, CSPAN.
Thanks for calling, Benita. What's your question for Congressman Matt Gaetz?
Well, I am so glad to see him working on the taxation is so high in the United States. It's went up, and I'm not a kid. My parents have been married 73 years. There are 7 generations of us all alive, and we have taxes that we just can't pay. And I appreciate that Republicans working on the taxes. I thank you for your time, and I hope that our Republicans will work together to get this done.
Well, I appreciate the comment. You know, you make a point about Republican unity and Republicans working together. My report to you, Benita, is that I've never seen Republicans as unified on Capitol Hill. Everyone understands the importance of getting these tax cuts passed. The president has been a great advocate and partner, and I look forward to getting it done just as you've asked for and just as the American people have demanded. Are
Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell unified enough with the president, giving him the support that he needs in his legislative and political priorities? That's
certainly what I see. Most Republicans, from Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell to the colleagues I sit next to on the floor, understand that tax reform is do or die for our party right now. After fumbling on health care, my colleagues understand that we have got to deliver on this fundamental promise we've made to the American people to not only cut taxes, but to actually produce the results of economic growth that President Trump promised in his campaign. The proof will be in the outcomes. We've got to see the economy grow at a far faster rate than it's growing today, with job creation, with wage growth, and I think that this tax cut can pair well with a lot of the regulatory reform that President Trump has already engaged in to really unlock the potential of the American economy.
You mentioned the president's campaign. There's that ongoing investigation into Russian influence in the 2016 election. We spent a lot of time earlier this week talking about the indictments, the guilty plea by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. You're somebody who's called for Mueller to recuse himself in this investigation. Why?
If you look at the connections between Russia and the Hillary Clinton campaign, the key nexus is this Uranium One deal, where the Clinton Foundation and President Clinton presumably received a great deal of consideration in exchange for this Uranium One transaction being approved. Mr. Mueller was intimately involved in that through his role in the Department of Justice. So as an attorney, I would apply the same standard to Robert Mueller that I to any other lawyer, and that if you've been involved potentially in a transaction, you cannot possibly be the lawyer that then is in the process of scrutinizing or investigating that transaction. And so I think the connections between Hillary Clinton, her husband, the Clinton campaign, and Russia necessarily would exclude Robert Mueller as the person to be able to pursue that.
Do you think the Mueller investigation should continue just without him in that role?
Well, look, we've had a great deal of investigation in the Congress from special counsel. If what this all comes down to is that 4 years before Donald Trump was running for president, Paul Manafort was moving money around in dubious ways, allegedly, I don't know that we've really got something to continue to pursue. I know we have multiple investigations going on in the Congress, and I suspect those will be wrapping up pretty soon with the conclusion that there was not this collusion that some have alleged.
We have to wrap up pretty soon to get you to your meeting, but Jim's been waiting in Strongburg, Illinois, line for Republicans. Jim, go ahead.
Good morning, Congressman. Three questions. One, is there going to be any effort to quantify the savings to the economy in terms of the nature of simplification? Thinking with respect to the taxpayer advocates' estimates of the numbers of hours and costs to the American economy of complying with tax code. Two, is there going to be any opportunity for reevaluating the itemized deductions people are able to take? Specifically, I don't feel that people should be allowed to write off their state, local taxes and mortgage interest expenses, because that's obviously a lot of people do not qualify for deductions related to home. And three,
Jim,
I'm really
we're running out of time, so let me let the congressman take
on the debt.
Let me let the congressman take it up.
Well, Jim, you're absolutely right that the simplification of the tax code alone makes a substantial contribution to the economy. And I do believe that when we really round out this legislation and add the details, we'll get a Congressional Budget Office score that will tell us a lot about the savings that the average American can expect when you're not having to go to lawyers and accountants just to get your taxes done. It's our expectation that by doubling the standard deduction, you'll have fewer people itemizing, as you described, and 9 out of every 10 Americans will be able to fill out their taxes on a postcard. I think that is something that the American people are really looking forward to, a system that is fair and easy to comply with. And what that will do is it will increase participation in the system. We got a lot of people that don't pay taxes now because it's complicated. When it's fair and easy, we'll have greater compliance, and I think that we'll have the confidence of the American people that we've got a system that's working for them.
Congressman Matt Gaetz, come back again, spend some more time with us. Appreciate it. We're going to let you run to your meeting.
Thanks so much. I enjoyed it.